Hello students, welcome to today's lecture. Today we are going to discuss chapter 7 of business studies. The chapter's name is Formation of a Company. Students, it's a very important chapter, not just from the point of view of your current classes examination, but also from the point of view of your knowledge about businesses, especially of the most complex and broadest structure of a business that you can form, which you have already learnt in the second chapter. We know that company is the biggest and the most complex structure of a business that can be formed. Now in this chapter, we are going to understand the entire process, which we already know is going to be complex. So we are going to understand that entire procedure for the formation of a company. Let us begin the chapter and let's pay real attention to the points that we are going to talk about today. First of all, what do we mean by formation? Formation of a business, and particularly of a company, basically refers to the entire time period and the entire series of steps which are required from the time the idea of the business originates to the time the company is legally born or ready to commence its business. So from the time, let's say, a person gets an idea that he or she wants to start and run a company on this idea, from the time of getting that idea in their head to the time when they get it registered and get their company legally born, that entire time duration and the entire series of steps is called formation of a company. The people who do all these activities, who take all these steps before the legal birth of the company, are called promoters, because they are promoting the company, they are taking up risks and they are promoting a company to actually have it born. Now, after having an overview of what promotion is, let us take a detailed look at the steps involved in promotion. We can also call these steps as functions of promoters, because all these things are done by the promoters. So now let us take a look at all these steps or functions one by one. The first thing to be done during the stage of promotion is identification of a business opportunity, which is very clear. Having identified the opportunity or having thought of the idea, the second step is doing feasibility studies. Feasibility studies are aimed at finding out whether that idea is workable, feasible in terms of finances, in terms of its acceptability and all. So the promoters have to study, have to make sure that when they actually start working physically on that idea, it should work. And that's why feasibility studies are very important. Once the promoters are really confident of their idea, now they can start thinking of forming the company. And the first thing that they would do is to think of a name, right? Everybody wants to have a good name for their company. So they think of a name and then they go for an approval of the name. They have to get the name approved with the registrar of the companies. The registrar does a check whether this name is legally acceptable, whether it infringes the name of some other company, or whether there are any other legalities involved. Once everything is clear, an approval for the name is given. Now once the name is approved, the next thing that the promoters do is fix up signatories to the memorandum of association. Now this is a very important part. The promoters have to form a document called a memorandum of association that works as the primary document for the the existence of the business basically. We'll talk about memorandum of association later on. What they have to do during promotion is find out and fix up signatories, people who will sign up the memorandum. They have to decide about the members who will be signing the memorandum, and usually people signing the memorandum are also the first directors of the company, right? So their written consent is what is needed, that they are ready to act as directors, they are ready to become the signatories to the memorandum of association. Once the promoters find out and fix up these signatories or the directors, now they move on, they take up the next step. The next step is appointment of professionals. The company has to appoint professionals such as bankers, auditors, etc., who can assist them in preparing the necessary documents which will be required at the time of registration. So the promoters go and find out suitable professionals to help them in the process of registration. With the help of these professionals, they take the next step, which is preparation of the necessary documents. Now, when we talk about the documents necessary or required, there are 2 or 3 very critical documents that we have to be really clear about. And the topmost of these documents is Memorandum of Association. Now, we'll talk about this document in detail. We'll understand what this actually means and stands for, right? So, as per the section 2, subsection 56 of Companies Act 2013, memorandum means Memorandum of Association of a company which is originally framed or as altered from time to time in pursuance of any previous company law or of this present act. So, this is basically a very technical definition. It just says that memorandum word is used for the document called the Memorandum of Association, which was either originally formed at the time of registration, or it could have been time to time altered also, but it should follow and obey either this current act or in the previous companies acts which were in operation before this current act of 2013. Basically, if in simpler terms you were to understand, then Memorandum of Association is the heart of the company. It contains all the important clauses, rules, regulations, terms and conditions that a company basically works at, especially to the outer world. It has all those information, everything related to the company that should be known to people. Some of the most important things that this document has are, number 1, the name clause of the company, which means it contains detailed information about the name of the company. Similarly, clause about the registered office, a clause on the object of the company, object or objective. This is a very, very important clause because it tells you what the company is actually made for, what is its objective of existence. Then there is a liability clause. This liability clause basically limits the liability of the members to the amount unpaid on the shares. As we have already seen in the previous chapters, that the members of a company usually have a limited liability. They are liable to pay only the amount which is unpaid on the shares owned by them. If a company needs an amount, needs some money, it can only ask the shareholders for what is due from them, the amount that they have not paid on their shares. It cannot ask anything extra. That's why we say that the liability of members is limited. Let's take an example to understand this. Let's say if a shareholder has purchased 1000 shares of rupees 10 each and has already paid rupees 6 per share. Now, in case of any need, the company can only ask for rupees 4 per share, and that will be his or her liability. So, the total liability of this particular shareholder will come out to be 4000 rupees, 4 rupees per share on 1000 shares, because this is what he had not paid yet. So, this liability clause basically limits the liabilities of the members in the company. Then there is a capital clause. It specifies the maximum capital which the company will be authorized to raise through issue of shares. For example, if the authorized share capital of a company is 25 lakh rupees divided into 2.5 lakh shares of rupees 10, then in any case the company cannot issue shares or share capital worth or more than rupees 25 lakh, which was mentioned in this capital clause. So, these were some of the most important clauses: the capital clause, liability clause, then this name clause, office clause and objective clause. There are several other clauses in the MOA or the Memorandum of Association. The MOA is the most important document for any company. Now, after MOA, there is another document which is very critical. It may not be as important as the MOA, but it is also very critical. It is called the AOA or Articles of Association. Articles of Association basically contains the rules regarding the internal management of the company. These rules are subsidiary to the Memorandum of Association. So, as I said, MOA is the primary document. It has all the most basic but necessary details of the company, whereas AOA has the rules regarding internal management of the company. It has rules regarding how the company is going to be run, how the internal policies are going to be there, right? So, that is why we say that these rules are subsidiary to the rules given in memorandum of association. After these two documents, another very important document is consent of the proposed directors. As we have already talked about, the promoters have to get the directors sign a document stating that they are giving their consent to become directors in the company. So now that we know that memorandum of association is the primary document, while articles of association is a subsidiary document. Now let us also take a look at some more basic differences between these two documents. The first difference obviously stands out in the form of objectives. As we have already talked about, MOA basically defines the objectives for which a company is formed, whereas an AOA has the rules regarding the internal management of the company. So we can say that AOA indicates how the objectives of the company will be achieved. So MOA outlines the objectives, whereas AOA outlines how these objectives will be achieved through the internal operations of the company. Second, if we talk about position, then it's very clear that MOA is the main document, whereas AOA is the subsidiary document after MOA. Third, if we talk about the relationship, then MOA defines the relationship of the company with outsiders, right? And AOA defines the relationship of the company with the insiders, among the insiders, the members and all, right? So these are the basic differences between these two documents. Both of these are very important. Having prepared these two documents, the third thing that the company goes on to prepare is the consent of proposed directors, which we have already talked about. They have to get it signed by the directors that they give their consent to become directors in the company. Then they have to also create an agreement in which the company proposes to enter into any contract or deal with individuals such as a managing director or a whole-time director or a manager. So any such agreement that a company intends to make or enter into with some individual, they have to get that agreement ready and present at the time of registration. Then there is a statutory declaration, a declaration stating that all the legal requirements pertaining to the registration have been complied with. So basically what this document means is that the company is undertaking, it is accepting, agreeing that it has already fulfilled all the requirements, it has already prepared and submitted all the documents, it is ready, it has complied with all the requirements of the Companies Act for registration. Thereafter, it has to pay the fees for registration and obtain a receipt for the payment of fee. Having prepared all these documents, they basically go and submit the documents to the registrar of the companies. So this is what the promoters do when they want to promote a company, when they want to start a company. From thinking of the idea to doing the studies, to name approval, to fixing up signatories, to preparing all these documents, it really takes a lot of hard work, a lot of planning, a lot of perseverance on the part of the promoters to actually get that idea ready to become a company. Having done all of this, now we come to the second stage of the formation of a company, which is the stage of incorporation. Incorporation or registration is what we mean when we say that a company is legally born. After fulfilling all the requirements, preparing all the documents, the company applies to the registrar of the company in the state in which they want to establish the registered office of the company. So in that same state, they go to the registrar's office, file in the application, submit all the documents and the fees, and once the registrar is satisfied about the completion of all the formalities of registration, he or she issues a certificate of incorporation. The certificate of incorporation is quite similar to the birth certificate of a person. It's like a document that signifies the birth of the company. Therefore, we can call it the birth certificate, right? Now, with effect from November 1, 2000, the registrar of companies also allots a CIN to the company. CIN is basically a corporate identity number to the company along with the certificate of incorporation. So now, having passed through this stage, the company gets legally born. But can it start functioning right away? No. Incorporation or obtaining the certificate of incorporation is basically just the birth of the company. Just like a human baby cannot start really walking from the birth itself, the company cannot start functioning just from the birth itself. The next thing that it has to do is obtain sufficient capital. Now, private companies do not actually need to go to the public to raise funds. They arrange funds privately. So, they do not actually have an issue or any lengthy process in it. But when we talk about a public company, we have already seen in the previous chapters that a public company basically raises funds from the public. That's why it is called a public company. So, if the promoters intend to start a public company, they will have to go through another procedure wherein they will try and obtain or get funds from the public by issuing securities, either shares or debentures. For doing the same, it has to issue a prospectus, which is an invitation to the public to subscribe to the capital of the company and undergo various other formalities. Now, let us take a detailed look at the steps in the process of acquiring the capital. Now, whenever a company is willing to acquire funds or raise funds from the public, the first thing that it has to do is to get an approval from the SEBI. SEBI, or the Securities Exchange Board of India, is a body in the Indian financial market that regulates the issue of securities. A public company inviting funds from the general public must make adequate disclosure of all relevant information and must not conceal any material information from the potential investors. And this is what the SEBI does. It checks whether the company is doing this or not. This is necessary for protecting the interest of the investors. Prior approval from SEBI is therefore required before going ahead with raising funds from the public. So, once the company has got the approval of SEBI, it then files up a prospectus. A prospectus can be called an invitation document, because through the prospectus, the company tries to provide information about its operations, its past, present and future plans, so that on the basis of these information provided in the prospectus, the potential investors or the people who are willing to invest in the company can make a decision. Especially, they can make an informed decision. So, people who actually want to even think of investing in a company, they would go through the prospectus, go through all the information, and once they are satisfied, then they would make up their mind to invest in the company. That's why we sometimes call it an invitation document, because through this the company tries to attract investors. It tries to make the information available to the prospective investors so that more and more people can actually get attracted and apply for the issue of the company. Having filed the prospectus, the company goes on to appoint bankers, brokers, underwriters, etc. These are agencies or organizations that take up several important responsibilities in the process of issue of shares particularly. Because this entire procedure of issuing shares, inviting applications, receiving money, selecting potential shareholders, all this really takes up a lot of effort. Instead of doing everything on its own, the company rather likes to appoint professionals. For example, the bankers, they basically handle all the money involved. The brokers, they basically help to get the shares to the people, the public. Whereas the underwriters, they are people, they are agencies who basically take up the whole issue of the company, and they give a guarantee to the company of ensuring that the entire issue is sold or subscribed to. In case, even if it is not subscribed completely, it is the underwriters who bear the risk. In return for their guarantee, they just demand a nominal commission or fee. Having got that, now it is the responsibility of the underwriters to ensure that the shares are subscribed thoroughly. So, bankers, brokers and underwriters really take off a lot of burden from the company by performing these very important functions of handling money, of ensuring reach to the buyers or ensuring subscription to the issue. Having appointed these people, now the company issues the shares. After the shares are issued, after the subscription is made public, now people start applying. After the closure of the subscription date, the company has to look at a very important factor. It has to make sure that the issue has reached minimum subscription. It is the minimum amount, minimum number of shares which should be subscribed by the public. Failing which, the company has to cancel the entire issue, which means if the company does not receive this particular minimum subscription, then they have to cancel the entire issue. Now, what is that minimum criteria? SEBI has issued guidelines for this. According to SEBI guidelines, minimum subscription in case of shares is 90% of the size of the issue, which means that if a company has issued 1 lakh shares, minimum of 90,000 shares must be subscribed. Otherwise, the company has to cancel the entire issue. Having ensured and secured minimum subscription, the company goes on to apply it to a stock exchange, because if a company wants to actually see its shares trade in the market, it has to apply it to a market, and a market is a stock exchange in the securities field. So basically a company has to go to a stock exchange, apply, so that once the investors buy the shares of the company, later on they can freely trade it in any market. For that purpose, the company has to get its shares enrolled or registered in any suitable stock exchange. Having done that, now the company goes on to allot the shares, right? It allots the shares to the selected investors, and finally those people become its shareholders. Allotment of shares usually completes the process of capital subscription. It ensures that the company is going to receive the amount of capital that it was intending to. And once it has done so, it goes back to the registrar, shows a documentary proof of the capital subscription, and in return, having satisfied with all of this, the registrar issues a certificate of commencement. Once the company receives a certificate of commencement, it is now legally allowed to start its operations. So dear students, this is what a company has to go through when it wants to actually get the company formed. The promoters and all those relevant people have to really make a lot of efforts, whether it is in the promotion stage or during incorporation or even after that for capital subscription. Once they receive the certificate of commencement, that's when the company can start functioning. I hope you were able to understand this entire process, because it is very important. It will help you in your coming classes also. Now, to close the class today, we will talk about a very special case of a company, which is the one-person company. After the implementation of the Companies Act 2013, India got a new form of business, which was the one-person company. As per this norm, a single person could form a company under the name of a one-person company. The introduction of OPC or one-person company in the legal system is a move that would encourage corporatization of micro businesses and entrepreneurship enterprises, especially the sole proprietors. This would bring them into the legal mainframe of businesses in the country. So what is a one-person company? Let's talk about its features briefly. Number one, it is a company which is formed by a person, a single person. Now this single person has to be a natural person who is a citizen and resident of India, right? So only a citizen and a resident and a natural person can form a one-person company, which means a company cannot form a one-person company, because a company is an artificial person. Only natural persons are allowed to form a company. Thereafter, no person shall be eligible to incorporate more than one-person company. Then, no minor can become a member or a nominee to a one-person company. Such a company cannot be incorporated or converted into a company later on. Such a company cannot carry out non-banking financial activities, including investment in securities. So keeping in mind all these points, now individuals or single people, one persons can form companies. They can get into the legal business framework of the Indian economy. So whether it is the OPC or a main company, mainframe company, they all have to really follow the procedure for formation of their own respective companies. This chapter does tell us about these procedures, the important steps under these procedures. I hope you were able to understand the steps. This was it from today's class. I'll see you in the next class. Thank you.